That's our process. So don't try and be outside that process, or you'll be outside that process.
Okay, I have a totally different viewpoint. Can I cut the lightning round for a hot sec?
You're welcome to do whatever you want.
Okay, so my opinion is that, which take it for a grain of salt, is that after looking at thousands of deals a year, it's really critically important to be memorable. So even at an accelerator demo day, I'll tell a story which I love, which is, a few years ago, Entrepreneurs Roundtable had their, summer demo day or whatever it is, and there was, one woman that was pitching, of course, of the 20 companies, and she gets up and she's, almost one of the last ones to really get up there and do her pitch, and she's knows the audience so well to the point that, hey, everyone's exhausted by this point. They're down there, they're looking at their emails, they're completely disengaged. But how does she regain the attention of the audience? And she gets up there and she says, well, everyone, I'm starting a wellness company, so I just want everyone to, sit back and maybe stretch your arms and just reach in your back pocket and pull out your checkbook. And I totally did not deliver that well, but she said something that broke the ice and was phenomenal and made everybody very visibly sit at the edge of their chairs and listen. So when I see a video or something in a deck that's different, or something, and it's not just video, it's not just a product demo, but something that says, I will not forget this, that's so incredibly powerful, because so much kind of falls into the noise and just gets swept up into like, oh, we've seen this 100 times, we want to bucket you here, or you're just like this, or you're just like that. Like, what's important to realize is that what you're pitching is not always what someone else is hearing, and that's something that's really important to get feedback on. Because again, if people will just want to put like a metaphor on it and just try to say, okay, even if you communicated this, they want to hear something else, and they might be only listening to what they want to hear. So the ability to again be able to like communicate in a very clear and concise manner is critically important, because you only have 20 seconds of someone's attention before they write you off, and especially with the deck, like if you've just got all these like teeny little like 8-point font things, like it's just it's gonna get lost. So
don't do that.
But
the deck, to us the deck is a medium, and now you have 15 pages, please not 55 pages, please not 15 pages to tell the story. It's a story arc. And if you want a better video, put the link in there, and we can, but talk to people in the way they want to be taught. Elsewise, it's very difficult to consume it. I don't know about you. I receive 300 new emails a day. There are so many I get 5 seconds into that I hit delete. Now, not pitches. Pitches, we have a process, and everybody reviews them. But I just get it. I can't live on email. I was reading a quote. It's Chang Men, who was the chief happiness officer at Google and taught meditation classes. And he talked about how, when he reflects on his life, on his deathbed, he'll want to think about how enlightened a life he had. And he worries he just thinks about how many emails he had to
that really resonates.
David, do you have anything to add to that?
Do not go into your meeting with a fake French accent. It will not work. It actually might work. It might actually work. I think the thing is, when you meet with angels and VCs, don't put them on pedestals and assume that they're these enlightened beings. As an entrepreneur, I'm a specialist. As an investor, I'm a generalist. There's no way any of us are going to know more about your business than you do. And so that doesn't mean we're not going to ask very challenging questions or try to call you out on BS or anything else, but you need to be prepared to A, stand your ground, and B, educate us. And if you think about things differently, you really cannot look at yourself as sort of the inferior power in the room. You have to look at yourself as an equal partner. And I think that's sometimes hard to do as an entrepreneur.
So Haley, I have a question for you, and then unfortunately we're out of time here. What do you have to say to non-traditional founders, who's basically anyone who's not a white, straight male from San Francisco and New York?
I don't think that's a traditional founder.
Well, this is sort of like my job, so I do have a lot to say, and it's very case specific. But it's about realizing that, you know, no matter who you are in your kind of entrepreneurial journey, there'll be people trying to kick you out of the way at every step, whether it be an investor trying to intimidate you with the question they think you might not have the answer to, or, you know, other founders, you know, butting you out of a conversation with an investor, or other people trying to, again, make it seem as though you're not, you know, you're not adding enough value with, you know, with what you're trying to build. And I think what's important is to maintain a certain level of, you know, temperament, and that people are going to give you so much advice. Like, we're all sitting up here saying, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And, you know, as David mentioned, you are the person that knows your business the best. So someone might be giving you advice when they were an entrepreneur, they did this 20 years ago when they were in a different industry, and maybe that worked perfectly for them. They might have so much conviction when they're, you know, sharing this with you that you say, oh my God, I have to drop everything and do that. However, you know, I've seen time and time again, you know, young entrepreneurs just taking that advice and running with it, again, because someone's on a pedestal. They're like, oh my God, if this person has done, you know, one thing good in their life, I have to, you know, go buy this playbook and do what they say. And I think you have to have so much conviction in your own ability to execute and find champions. And as I mentioned earlier, you need, you know, it takes a village to do anything, you know, in this industry, and you need champions that are in so many different places, that are, you know, that are using their mouths and talking about you and sharing you and promoting you. Because if you are out there fighting your own battle, it's just, you know, just by nature of it, it's going to be really difficult to conquer this. So no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, like, you know, it's not easy going through this this process of, you know, for many of the reasons mentioned, and it's so much easier to say no than yes, but finding ways to de-risk these conversations by doing your diligence, pre-filtering whoever's going to be on the other side of the table to make sure they're going to understand what you're building. And then just to say, you know, you can't take it personally if an investor says no to you, because more often than not, it might just be, you know, straying out of the mandate, or they might be, you know, drying up on their funds, or they have to go back out to LPs. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why you may not get the yes in your first, you know, 10, 20, 30 meetings. But, you know, maintaining like a centralization and connection to the underlying, you know, passion and mission for what you're building, which, and again, you know, we see in our portfolio, so many of our companies, you know, something happened to like their grandmother when they were, you know, a kid, and they spent their whole entire life, you know, figuring out an engineering solution to solve that problem, right? So realizing that, you know, if you can be there when shit hits the fan and you're gonna stick around, then, you know, then find other people that agree with you and believe in you, and that's the best you can do.
Okay, we're going to open up the floor now to questions. We have a few rules. The question should end with a question mark.
You should only be one question.
Yeah, this isn't an opportunity to pitch your company, etc. So please, by all means.
Actually, let me begin. I just have one question. Topic that's, you know, kind of talked about a lot is founders' depression. On the investor side, I'm sure you've had some meltdowns, some issues. What happens? Like, how do you deal with that? How do you talk to the entrepreneurs, and what usually happens after? What's the thought process with that? Question mark.
So it depends. You know, if, as I mentioned before, we have a tendency to step up, not step back, and we've had situations where founders have been in tough situations, and we'll lend an ear and we'll do unnatural acts to kind of help them. We've also had a situation, I can think of one, and maybe more, where a founder basically just disconnected from the company and was sort of going to Peru, chewing wood bark with his shaman, and then coming back once every 3 weeks and giving different direction to the team. You know, ultimately it was depression behind it, but it just was not tenable to, you know, have capital allocated by someone with that kind of approach. So I think if there's a team-like approach, one can work with it and help them. And sometimes it's situational, and sometimes it's, you know, just, look, it's really tough being a CEO. Really tough. You're kind of alone, you're having to make all these chief executive decisions, kind of comes in the title. And, You don't know the answer necessarily, but you have to give direction and do it, and there can be the weight of the world on your shoulders, so it can be really tough. And what we try to do is help our CEO teams do the right thing, so that we can get mentor coaches for them. We can help them around the situational aspect, and I'm not going to talk about people's particular situations, but you have a few levers as an investor of things you can do. And you can, it is rare that the founding CEO becomes the CEO of a company should it go public. It's rare. It happens. Adam Miller is still the CEO of Cornerstone On Demand. First invested in the company when it was him and 3 other people in 2001. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar public company. But that's rare. And often, the CEO doesn't necessarily recognize that they've reached the point where the job is just about to get really unfun for them. And so sometimes you have to help them and explain it to them. That can take some time and energy. But I look at it this way, it's a similar role as parenting, where you don't have control as a parent, but you have guidance, and you're guiding them as to what's the best outcome for them and for the team. And sometimes, the situation is, resolved because it was very circumstantial, and those circumstances have now changed. So it varies from situation to situation. There are a number of startups that look to address this particular problem, and there are a number of services available through apps and elsewise to help people. And I think that's come out of the fact that people have seen this up close.
To John's earlier comment about diligencing your investors, it's critically important. There's an expression, I'll go back to French, in French, il y a les cons partout, which is effectively they're assholes everywhere. And you can find them in venture, you can find them in startups, you can find them, just about anywhere. And you'd be best served to avoid them where possible. And so when you're going to put yourself in this very, very uncomfortable position of being a startup founder, being a startup executive, you want people who are going to support you as a human being. And part of your diligence process before you accept the check, and I learned this the hard way, is to find out what those people are like when things aren't going well. And you're not going to experience that empirically, so you're going to have to talk to their other portfolio companies, their other founders and everything else, and see what kind of support, because that's a great answer. When I had a rough time in my first startup, I didn't get that support. I got a boot on my neck. And, it didn't make things easier for me, that's for sure. It certainly has informed the way I treat, the people in whom I invest. But yeah, doing the diligence, I think, is an important thing.
Okay, questions? I'll take the mic to you. You'll do it? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Abby Sugar. I feel like a lot of the conversation tonight has centered around at least 2 of you being in the venture capital space and only 1 of you being an angel investor. Do you have any opinions or thoughts for startups when they're going for initial funding, making a decision if they're going to go the angel route or the VC route? Or as a VC, do you have feelings about them starting with angel money and then coming to you? Or as an angel investor, do you have feelings about them, saying, well, down the line, we're trying to go this VC way. Does that turn you off? Or what's your opinion on that?
So it's hard for me to pick a side, right? Because I'm also a startup person. I think, if you're going to raise your first money, the group of available VCs to you is going to be, appreciably smaller than those who would be doing like a Series A. I think, Haley said earlier, money has become a commodity. When I did my Series A in 2006, my first company was $750,000. That's now called pre-seed investment. So there are accelerators that exist now. The size of the angel community here in New York has probably increased at least an order of magnitude in the last 15 years. And And VCs are accountable to LPs. LPs are limited partners. And so they have a fiduciary responsibility, the investors, to maximize return on investment. As an angel investor, I don't have the same threshold for due diligence or anything else. I can make the decision about whether or not I'm comfortable making the investment for me. And so, as a practical matter, it's probably going to be easier for you to raise angel money earlier, larger kind of audience, lower diligence threshold.